A story is any level part of a building that could be used by people. The plurals are stories and storeys, respectively. The terms floor, level, or deck can also be used in this sense, except that one may use ground floor and ground level for the floor closer to what is considered the ground or street level. The words story and floor also generally exclude levels of the building that have no roof, even if they are used by people, such as the terrace on the top roof of many buildings. Overview. Houses commonly have only one or two floors. Buildings are often classified as low-rise, mid-rise and high-rise according to how many levels they contain, but these categories are not well defined. The tallest skyscraper in the world, Burj Khalifa, has 163 floors. As of 2013, the tallest planned skyscraper, Sky City, is planned to have 202 floors. The height of each story is based on the ceiling height of the rooms plus the thickness of the floors between each pane. Generally, this is around 10 feet total, however, it varies widely from just under this figure to well over it. Stories within a building need not be all the same height. Often the lobby is more spacious, for example. Additionally, higher levels may be smaller in volume than the ones beneath them. In English, the principal floor or main floor of a house is the floor that contains the chief apartments. It is usually the ground floor, or the floor above. In Italy, the main floor of a home is usually above the ground level, and may be called the piano nobile. The attic or loft is a story just below the building's roof. Its ceiling is often pitched and/or at a different height than that of other floors. A penthouse is a luxury apartment on the topmost story of a building. A basement is a story below the main ground floor. The first basement of a home is also called the lower ground floor. Split-level homes have floors that offset from each other by less than the height of a full story. A mezzanine, in particular, is typically a floor halfway between the ground floor and the next higher floor. Homes with a split-level entry have the entire main floor raised half a story height above the street entrance level, and a basement that is half a story below this level. In Macy's Herald Square, there is a 1.5 floor between the first and second. This can be considered a split-level floor. There are also multi-story car parks, also known as parking garages. Numbering. Floor numbering is the numbering scheme used for a building's floors. There are two major schemes in use across the world. In one system, used in the majority of Europe, the ground floor is the floor on the ground and often has no number or is assigned the number 0. Therefore, the next floor up is assigned the number 1 and is the first floor. The other system, used primarily in the United States and Canada, counts the bottom floor as numbers chapter 0, a ground floor in some states and 1 of first floor in other states. The next floor up then becomes the first or second floor and so on. In both systems, the numbering of higher floors continues sequentially as one goes up, as shown in the following table. Consecutive number floor designations. Each scheme has further variations depending on how one refers to the ground floor and the subterranean levels. The existence of two incompatible conventions is a common source of confusion in international communication, sometimes even between communities who speak the same language. In all English-speaking countries, however, the stories in a building are counted in the same way. Thus, for example, the phrase "a 7-story building" would mean the same thing in Britain and in the US, namely, a building with 7 covered floors, including 1 at ground level and 6 at higher levels, even though the topmost of those levels would be called 6th floor in Britain, America, and 7th floor in America. Some count mezzanines as stories while some do not. European scheme. In most of Europe, the first story or first floor is the first level above ground level. This scheme is also used in many former British colonies, many Latin American countries, in Hawaii, and in many of the Commonwealth nations. This convention can be traced back to medieval European usage. In countries that use this system, the floor at ground level is usually referred to by a special name, usually translating as ground floor or equivalent. For example, rez-de-chaussée in France, Erdgeschoss in Germany, piano terra in Italy, began grande in the Netherlands, planta baja or planta baixa in Spain, barraco solero in Basque, and a terreo in Brazil, arquetes de chão in Portugal, folds cint in Hungary, parter in Romania and Poland, prizme in Slovakia and pritlika in Slovenia. In some countries that use this scheme, the higher floors may be explicitly qualified as being above the ground level, such as in Slovenian prvo nadstropje. In Spain, the level above ground level is sometimes called entresuelo, and elevators may skip it. The next level is sometimes called principal. The first floor can therefore be 3 levels above ground level. In Italy, in the ancient palaces, the first floor is called piano nobile, since the noble owners of the palace lived there. East Asian, North American scheme. The English-speaking parts of Canada generally follow the American convention, where the first floor is the floor at the ground level and the floor above it is the second floor. Canada, however, uses the spelling story, not story. In Quebec, the European scheme was formerly used, but by now it has been mostly replaced by the US system, so that rez-de-chaussée and premier étage are now generally equivalent in Quebec. Mexico, on the other hand, uses the European system. This system is also used in some Latin American countries. So, for example, planta baja and primo piso, which are distinct in Spain and Mexico, are equivalent in Chile and Peru, and refer both to the ground level floor. In Russia and some countries former of Soviet Union, the upper floors are counted using US system, however the basements are counted differently. The first basement in UK and US is called in Russia. The second basement in UK and US is called in Russia. Most parts of Eastern Asia, including China, Korea, Japan, and Singapore, follow this system. In the grammar of the respective languages, the numbers precede the word floor and are cardinals rather than ordinals, so they would translate literally as 1 floor, 2 floor, rather than first floor, second floor, or floor 1, floor 2. In Vietnam, European scheme is used in the southern part of the country, but the American scheme is more prevalent in the northern and central regions. Cardinal numbers usually follow the word floor. The northern Vietnamese system is also used in Indonesia. In Singapore, the British system of numbering originally prevailed. This was replaced in the 1980s with the North American scheme to reconcile with other Asian countries. In order to emphasize the difference from the original scheme, reference is frequently made to stories rather than floors, where the third floor becomes either the fourth story or fourth level. Many buildings continue to label stories as levels rather than floors. However, in the absence of clear official distinction between the terms, the meaning of floors and levels have become interchangeable with story and is reflected in newer buildings. Similarly, in Hawaii, the Hawaiian language floor label uses British floor numbering. However, the English language floor label uses American floor numbering. Formerly, the English floor label also uses British floor numbering. which in Hawaiian is respectively, but it was also replaced by a North American scheme to make it the same as the rest of the U.S. To emphasize this difference, buildings in Hawaii uses level rather than floor. Thus, lepo papa equals ground floor equals level 1, papa akahi equals first floor equals level 2, etc. Idiosyncrasies. Some American high-rise buildings follow the British-European system, often out of a desire on the part of the building's architect or owners, an arrangement often found in high-rise public housing blocks, particularly those built in the United Kingdom during the 1960s and 1970s, is that elevators would only call at half the total number of floors, or at an intermediate level between a pair of floors. Thus, a 24-story building would only have 12 apparent floors, a 30-story building would have 15 apparent floors, and so on. This was commonly used as a cost-saving measure to reduce the number of elevator shaft doors needed to service the building. Therefore, staircases would be used to access an upper and lower level from each intermediate landing. Occasionally, buildings in the United States and Canada will have both a first floor and a ground floor below it. This typically happens when both floors have street-level entrances, as is often the case for hillside buildings. In the UK, the lower of these floors would be called the lower ground floor, while the upper would be called either the upper ground floor or simply the ground floor. Multi-story car parks which have a staggered arrangement of parking levels sometimes use a convention where there may be an upper and lower level of the same floor number, although the elevators will typically only serve one of the two levels, or the elevator lobby for each floor pair may be between the two levels. In 19th-century London, many buildings were built with the main entrance floor being 1 meter above ground, and a floor below that being 2 meters below ground. This was done partly for aesthetics and partly to allow access between the lower lever and the street without going through the main floor. In this situation, the lower level is called lower ground. The main floor is called upper ground, and floors above it are numbered serially from 1. There may also be a storage floor called cellar below lower ground. Sometimes, floor number the first may be assigned to the lowest basement level. In that case, the ground floor may be numbered to a higher. Sometimes two connected buildings have incongruent floor numberings, due to sloping terrain at different ceiling heights. To avoid this, shopping centers may call the main floors unusual names such as upper mall, lower mall, and toilet mezzanine, with the parking floors being numbered PN. In Norway and Sweden, the floors are numbered as in the North American scheme, but one can also refer to them by how many flights of stairs one needs to climb to reach them from the ground floor. So, in Swedish 2 våningen is the same as 1 trapp upp, 3 våningen is also 2 trapp upp, and so on. In modern lifts, however, floors are usually numbered according to British convention, where the street level is referred to EABV and the next floor is given the number 1. In some instances, buildings may omit the 13th floor in the floor numbering because of common superstition surrounding this number. The floor numbering may either go straight from 12 to 14, or the floor may be given an alternative name such as Skyline or 14A. In Hong Kong, the British numbering system is now generally used in English and Chinese alike. In some older residential buildings, however, the floors are identified by signs in Chinese characters that say, at the floor just above ground, as in the North American system. For those buildings, the Chinese phrase, or its English equivalent, third floor, may refer either to the story 3 levels above ground, which is actually labeled, or to the story with the sign, which is only 2 levels above ground. This confusing state of affairs has led, for example, to numerous errors in utility billing. To avoid ambiguity, business forms often ask that story numbers in address fields be written as accessed from a lift. In some mainland Chinese and Taiwanese buildings, the fourth floor is actually omitted, a skip, along with other floors ending in 4 such as the 14th and 24th floors, with the floor above the third numbered as the 5th and so on. This is due to the Chinese word for being very phonetically similar to the word for dead or die. Also for this reason, apartments on the 4th floor in Asian countries such as Taiwan have traditionally been cheaper to rent. This cultural superstition can be considered a form of tetraphobia. It is also common in China for the 13th floor to also be omitted. In Eastern Europe, occasionally buildings have different numbering when counting floor names and floor number on the rooms. For example, a Lithuanian building uses British floor numbering on floor names, but it uses American floor numbering on the room numbers. In Hawaii, the Hawaiian language floor label uses the British system, but the English language floor label uses the American system. For example, Papa Akalu equals level 4. Lift, elevator buttons. In most of the world, elevator buttons for stories above the ground level are usually marked with the corresponding numbers. In many countries, modern elevators also have braille numbers, are often mandated by law. European scheme. In countries that use the European system, the ground floor is either marked 0 or with the initial letter of the local word for ground floor. Successive floors are then marked 1, 2, etc. However, even when the ground floor button is marked with a letter, some digital position indicators may show 0 when the lift elevator is on that floor. If the building also contains floors below ground, negative numbers are common. This then gives a conventional numbering sequence -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, ... In Spain and other countries whose official language is Spanish or Portuguese, the ground floor is usually marked PB, and in buildings where these exist, the entresuelo or entresol and principal are marked T and P, respectively. In France, floors are usually marked the same way as in Spain. However, the letters for the ground floor are RC, seldom simplified to R. Where these exist, there are high ground RCH and lower ground RCB, or garden ground RJ and former ground RC. In Portugal, the letters corresponding to the ground floor are RC is simply R. For example, in the Polish language there is a clear distinction. The word parter means ground floor and pietro means a floor above the parter, usually with an ordinal, first pietro, second pietro, etc. Therefore, a parter is the 0th pietro. Older elevators in Poland have button marked P for the ground floor and S for basement. Elevators installed since 1990 have 0 for parter and -1, -2, etc. for underground floors. In Hawaiian language, the labels, from the ground floor to the 6th, 7th floor, are, in order, LP, P1, P2, P3, P4, P5 and P6. North American scheme. In countries that use the North American system, where floor 1 is the same as ground floor, the corresponding button may be marked either with 1 or with a letter, as in the European scheme. In either case, the next button will be labeled 2. In buildings that have both a first floor and a ground floor, they may be labeled 1 and G or M and LM. M may also be used to designate a mezzanine level, when it is not counted as a separate floor in the building's numbering scheme. In modern signage, at least in North America, a 5-pointed star additionally appears beside the button for the main entry floor. In the United States, the 5-pointed star marking is mandated by Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act, is described in Section 4.10.12 of the ADA Accessibility Guidelines for Buildings and Facilities. Subterranean floors. The numbering of levels below ground is also quite varied, even within the same country. In English-speaking countries, the first level below ground may be labeled B for basement, L for lower level, or level.The, C for cellar, or, in the case of the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, U for underground. In British buildings, LG for lower ground is commonly encountered. If there is more than one basement, the next level down may be marked as B for sub-basement. The lower levels may also be numbered B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, B6, B7, B8, B9, B10, etc. Negative numbers are sometimes used. -1 for the first level below ground, -2 for the second one, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8, -9, -10, etc. Lettered levels are also sometimes used. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, etc. In Hawaiian, these levels are numbered I1, I2, I3, and so on. The I stands for Hilelo, meaning basement, half-height, split-level parking garages. In malls, one may find half-height parking garages, in which the floors are named after the mall, but the floors that between the mall's floors may have suffixes like A or M added. For example, 1, 1A, 2, 2A, etc. The floors may be numbered as 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, or 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, etc. Elevators in half-height parking garages in malls usually stop only at the mall levels and not the parking levels between the mall levels. In split-level parking garages, the lower level may have the suffix A and the upper level have the suffix B, like 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, etc. Elevators in split-level parking garages normally stop at one of the two split levels between the two split levels, and the levels in elevators may be named just 1, 2, etc. Other labels. Elevator buttons may also be labeled according to the main function. In English-speaking countries, besides the common L for lobby, one may find P for pool or parking, S for skyway or street, R for restaurant or roof, PH for penthouse, OD for observation deck, W for walkway, T for tunnel, ticketing at trains, V for vendora, etc. In some U.S. buildings, the label G on the elevator may stand for the building's garage, which need not be located on the ground floor. Fairmont Royal York Hotel in Toronto marks the first 6 floors as L, M, M, C, H and 1. The North Carolina Museum of Art, whose entrance is on the 3rd floor up, has the floors lettered C, B, A and O. The Festival Walk Mall in Hong Kong has floors labeled LG2 and LG1, G and UG. Room numbering. In modern buildings, especially large ones, room or apartment numbers are usually tied to the floor numbers, so that one can figure out the latter from the former. Typically one uses the floor number with 1 or 2 extra digits appended to identify the room within the floor. For example, room 215 could be the 15th room of floor 2. But to avoid this confusion, 1 dot is sometimes used to separate the floor from the room, or a leading 0 is placed before a single-digit room number. Letters may be used, instead of digits, to identify the room within the floor, such as 21E instead of 215. Often odd numbers are used for rooms on one side of a hallway, even numbers for rooms on the other side. An offset may be used to accommodate unnumbered floors. For example, in a building with floors labeled G, M, 1, 2, 11 and 12, the 4th room in each of those floors could be numbered 104, 114, 124, 134, 224 and 234, respectively, with an offset of 110 in the floor numbers. This trick is sometimes used to make the floor number slightly less obvious, e.g., for security or marketing reasons. In Eastern Europe, occasionally the floor label may be different from the floor indicator on the room number. For example, on this floor plan on http www.zarasu15.lt/files/pyramus_orchestras JPEG. It is labeled as the first floor, but the room numbers start at 2, which indicates second floor. Portugal. In Portugal, the rule is, in buildings with only 2 corridors, all the apartments are marked as ESQ or DTO. So we have CVESQ, RCESQ, first, ESQ, etc., and CVDTO, RCDTO, first, DTO, etc. Buildings with more than 2 apartments per floor are marked with letters clockwise within each deck. So apartment 8th D means the 8th floor, apartment D. But a very common form for buildings with 3 apartments per floor is ESQ, FRT, FDE, DTO. These 2 rules, universally adopted, made many things easy, namely for blind people, who do not need to ask where the apartment X is.